The craziest body counts in medieval history. The medieval period wasn't just about knights and castles. It was humanity's bloodiest chapter. We're talking about death tolls so massive they literally changed the course of human civilization. Plagues that wiped out half of Europe. Wars that left entire regions uninhabitable. Conquests that erased civilizations from the map. Today, we're diving into the most shocking casualty numbers in medieval history. Fair warning, these numbers are so staggering, they'll make modern disasters look like minor incidents. Buckle up. This is medieval history's darkest scorecard. Let's start with the granddaddy of all medieval disasters, the Black Death. This wasn't just a plague. It was the closest thing to an apocalypse medieval Europe ever experienced. The numbers: 75 to 200 million deaths across Europe, Asia, and North Africa. In Europe alone, it killed between 30 to 60% of the population. That's roughly 1 out of every 2 people dead in just 4 years. To put this in perspective, if a similar plague hit today's world, we'd be looking at 2 to 4 billion deaths. Entire cities became ghost towns overnight. In some regions of England, 70% of the population simply vanished. The plague was so efficient at killing that it fundamentally changed European society. Labor shortages ended feudalism, triggered religious crises, and accelerated technological innovation because there simply weren't enough people left to do everything manually. But here's the truly terrifying part. Contemporary accounts describe streets literally carpeted with corpses. In Avignon, the Pope consecrated the Rhone River because there wasn't enough consecrated ground to bury all the bodies. People were just dumping corpses into the water. If the Black Death was nature's attempt at human population control, the Mongol conquests were humanity's most efficient killing machine. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, the Mongols created history's largest contiguous empire and left an ocean of blood in their wake. The numbers: conservative estimates put Mongol-caused deaths at 30 to 40 million people. More aggressive estimates suggest up to 70 million deaths, roughly 11% of the world's population at the time. The Mongols weren't just conquerors. They were systematic exterminators. When cities refused to surrender, the Mongols would kill literally everyone: men, women, children, even pets and livestock. They'd build pyramids from severed heads as warnings to other cities. Take the siege of Nishapur in 1221. After the city killed Genghis Khan's favorite son-in-law, the Mongols slaughtered every living thing in the city. Even cats and dogs were killed. The death toll? Over 1 million people in a single city. The Mongols were so thorough in their destruction that some regions didn't recover their pre-invasion populations for centuries. Iran's population didn't return to pre-Mongol levels until the 20th century. That's 700 years of demographic recovery. The Crusades sold themselves as holy wars, but the reality was centuries of religious-fueled slaughter that claimed millions of lives across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The numbers: estimates vary wildly, but historians suggest 1 to 3 million deaths during the major crusades. However, this number drastically underrepresents the true toll when you include related conflicts, famines, and disease outbreaks. The First Crusade alone was a bloodbath. When Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099, they spent 3 days systematically murdering every Muslim and Jewish resident they could find. Contemporary accounts describe blood flowing ankle-deep through the streets. But here's what's really crazy. The Crusades weren't just about Christians versus Muslims. The Fourth Crusade, 1204, saw Christian crusaders sack Constantinople, a Christian city, and slaughter thousands of fellow Christians. The Crusaders were equal opportunity killers. The Children's Crusade of 1212 was particularly horrific. Thousands of children, convinced they could peacefully convert Muslims through divine intervention, set off for the Holy Land. Most died of disease and starvation before they even left Europe. Those who survived were often sold into slavery. Despite its name, the 100 Years' War actually lasted 116 years and turned France into a medieval killing field. This wasn't just armies fighting armies, it was total warfare that devastated entire populations. The numbers, direct military casualties, numbered in the hundreds of thousands, but the real toll came from famines, disease, and civilian massacres that killed millions more. The war introduced new levels of military brutality. The English longbow could punch through armor at 300 yards, turning battlefields into slaughterhouses. At Agincourt, 1415, English archers killed thousands of French knights in a single afternoon. But the real horror was what happened to civilians. Free companies, essentially medieval mercenary gangs, roamed the countryside, pillaging, raping, and murdering anyone they encountered. These weren't disciplined armies. They were armed criminal organizations that treated civilians as prey. The war devastated France so thoroughly that some regions lost 80% of their population. Villages were abandoned, farmland returned to forest, and entire cultural traditions disappeared because there was nobody left to maintain them. While Western Europe was dealing with Viking raids and feudal squabbles, the Byzantine Empire and various Arab states were locked in a 400-year death spiral that consumed millions of lives. The numbers, over 4 centuries of almost constant warfare, the death toll easily reached into the millions. These weren't short, decisive campaigns. They were generational conflicts that turned entire regions into permanent battlefields. The Arab conquests of the 7th and 8th centuries were particularly brutal. When Damascus fell in 635, thousands were slaughtered. The siege of Constantinople in 717 to 718 saw Arab forces lose over 100,000 men to disease, combat, and starvation. But the Byzantines gave as good as they got. Emperor Basil, too, earned the nickname Bulgar Slayer after defeating a Bulgarian army and ordering 14,000 prisoners to be blinded, leaving only one eye intact in every 100th man to guide the others home. The Vikings weren't just raiders. They were medieval Europe's most efficient killers, striking without warning and leaving devastation in their wake. The numbers. While individual Viking raids might only kill hundreds or thousands, the cumulative effect over 300 years was enormous. Entire monasteries were slaughtered, coastal towns were repeatedly destroyed, and slave raids depopulated vast areas. The Vikings specialized in psychological warfare. They'd attack monasteries during religious festivals when they were packed with pilgrims, maximizing casualties and terror. The massacre at Lindisfarne in 793 shocked medieval Europe, not just because of the deaths, but because of the systematic desecration that followed. Viking slave raids were particularly horrific. They'd sweep through coastal areas, killing the old and weak, while capturing everyone else for slavery. Ireland lost an estimated 200,000 people to Viking slave raids during the 9th and 10th centuries. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and showcased medieval warfare's ultimate evolution into systematic slaughter. The numbers. While the siege itself only killed about 4,000 defenders, what happened afterward was medieval urban warfare at its most brutal. Ottoman forces spent 3 days looting, raping, and murdering throughout the city. Sultan Mehmed II had promised his soldiers 3 days of unrestricted pillaging as payment for their service. The result was systematic massacre of civilians, destruction of priceless cultural artifacts, and the effective end of Byzantine civilization. The psychological impact was enormous. Constantinople had been Christianity's eastern stronghold for over 1,000 years. Its fall sent shockwaves across Europe and marked the definitive end of the medieval period. Sometimes the Catholic Church turned its crusading fervor on fellow Christians. The Albigensian Crusade was essentially a 20-year genocide campaign against the Cathars of southern France. The numbers. Estimates suggest 200, 0 to 1, 000,000 deaths during the 20-year campaign. Entire cities were destroyed, and the distinct culture of Occitania was effectively exterminated. The siege of Béziers in 1209 epitomized the campaign's brutality. When asked how to distinguish between Cathars and Catholics, the papal legate allegedly replied, "Kill them all. God will recognize his own." The entire population, roughly 20,000 people, was slaughtered. This wasn't just religious persecution. It was cultural genocide. The troubadour tradition, Occitan language, and the relatively tolerant culture of southern France were systematically destroyed. Medieval history's body counts reveal a period when human life was considered remarkably cheap. Entire populations could be wiped out over religious differences, territorial disputes, or simple greed. These numbers aren't just statistics. They represent the destruction of knowledge, culture, and human potential on a scale that's hard to comprehend. The Black Death alone killed more people than both world wars combined. But here's what's truly sobering. These medieval disasters shaped the world we live in today. The Black Death ended feudalism. The Crusades created centuries of religious conflict, and the Mongol conquests connected East and West in ways that still influence global politics. Medieval history's bloodiest chapters remind us that civilization is fragile Human nature can be terrifyingly destructive, and the line between order and chaos is thinner than we'd like to believe. The medieval period wasn't the Dark Ages because people were ignorant. It was dark because it was literally drenched in blood.